Training camp is getting close to the end for the San Francisco 49ers. We're already looking at about 3 weeks away before they begin week 1, heading to Australia to play their division rival, Los Angeles Rams. And time's starting to run out. It's running out on the 49ers for them to figure out what is going on at left guard. Who is going to be their starter there? Because so far, no one's been able to pull away. They haven't said anyone has looked anywhere near impressive or is getting close to stealing the job. And given from what was shown in the first preseason game, there's not much to feel hope for about. You know, Connor Kobe got most of the reps. It's the first half of training camp about like 10 days ago, and now he's just a right guard exclusive. He's barely getting any first team reps, if at all, from now on. And Robert Jones has been sliding in there, but he hasn't been much better either. You know, in the second preseason game, it's about to approach. It's about to be here already against the Chargers. And that's going to be a huge tell for the 49ers of who's going to be stealing away that position. Because right now, who their last hope that they have to turn to is rookie Carver Willis. That's literally their last hope. And I'm not talking Star Wars here, you know. So they are pressed for options here, you know. But they have no one to blame but themselves. This is what they thought. They were hoping Connor Kobe was going to take that next step, even though evidence showed last season he was god awful. Like, he was bad. It's funny because in the 2 games he played in relief of Ben Barch in a couple of games, he was pretty solid. He was very solid. He looked like he could be the future guard for the next, you know, few years, foreseeable future. When he actually got the starting role, he just sunk. He sunk like the Titanic. Like, the lights were too bright. He was just getting punked. He was hopeless. And then eventually the 49ers went to Spencer Burford, and that helped a little bit, but ultimately it was a hole. So now you're looking at Carver Willis to be your savior, barring all of a sudden Robert Jones pulling a massive stretch here, but it doesn't sound like it. So you're really looking at rookie Carver Willis to be your answer. And I wouldn't hold my breath on that, because this is a guy who never played in the interior. He has no guard experience in college. He was predominantly an offensive tackle. So not only is it, number one, going to be difficult for him to make that transition, or he's going to have to spend time learning the transition, the position, which, you know, it's not like he's going from tackle to tight end or something like that. There will be a little bit of some cheating. He knows, like, okay, I can skip the first 25-30% of the learning process. Maybe more, depending on how skillful he is. But also, the likelihood is it's going to take a long time and a very hard amount of reps that he's going to need to acclimate himself. So not only is that hard for that transition, but getting accustomed to the 49ers offense, especially when he already missed, almost a couple weeks with a concussion. And that was brutal for him. So now imagine if he had those weeks on top of the next 2 to 3 that's before the regular season, for him to be like, okay, he actually may be a sufficient option. We can run with it if you're the 49ers. But it's a tall task for him. You know, a lot's going to be shown in that next preseason game against the Chargers coming up here. And if he does decent, even if he has some mistakes, struggles, then at least they can have something to be like, all right, we got something here we can work with. But I feel like all these options they have on the table, whether they go back to Kobe, whether Jones maybe does flash, Carver Willis, all these happening, and for it to sustain itself feels very unlikely. I don't believe their starting left guard option is on the roster. So now your 49ers are going to be looking at, once that final 53-man is official for all 32 teams, you're going to look at see who's few interesting guards that, like, hey, he's pretty solid, we can just plug and play him, and hopefully we get him up to speed in a few weeks. Or do you make a trade? Trading for guards is a little unusual. Is there someone out in free agency? Probably not. You would have signed him by now, right? It's kind of get to the point where they're kind of stuck here. And it's going to lead them to one last desperate option of how they're going to solve their unsettled starting left guard position. And it's by platooning, rotating that spot. They did it before. Like, it's very unusual for a team to rotate offensive linemen, which is kind of crazy because you think about it, defensive linemen get rotated so much. Even Nick Bosa doesn't play 100% of the snap, or even 95 or 90. He usually gets like 80 because he needs to be refreshed. That's why pass rushers tend to have a little bit more of that edge, even though offensive linemen sometimes get away with holding a lot, but I digress. So in that respect, in that realm, it's kind of is odd. So you would think it'd be a little more normalized, but the thing is, it's not. It's offensive linemen getting rotated is not a normal thing, but it is for the 49ers, and they can do it. They've done it before in 2022 and 2023 with Spencer Burford at right guard. 2022, they did it with Spencer Burford and Daniel Brunskill. Very weird, but somehow it worked. You know, their offense wasn't bad at all because of it. Maybe at times it showed that, like, okay, this is kind of inconsistent, it's not working, but for the most part, it did work fine. Maybe it wasn't the greatest, but it was fine enough for them to keep soaring high with Christian McCaffrey and eventually Brock Purdy when he took over. And then the next year, 2023, en route to a Super Bowl, you had Spencer Burford still, who you really wanted him to lock on and anchor that position, but he just never could get it. But he was good enough so you can play him in spurts with John Feliciano. And then eventually Feliciano proved to be way too consistent and too good enough of a player for him just to be at a platoon role or even on the bench. And then, sure enough, you have your starter. So, 2 seasons removed, 2024, 2025, or I guess 3 if my math is math dummy here. They definitely can go back to that well. They definitely can go back to that approach, and I fully expect them to, if they don't make any additions following the final 53-man rosters being finalized. Because I do think they will try to poke a guard or two from a team that lets someone go that's like, you know what, he kind of showed some promise, but we can't really afford it here. We just can't. We just can't stick him there. We can't afford the depth chart, the roster piece for him. So maybe you can get that. Or maybe you do find someone scooped in the free agency, whatever. If they don't find that addition, if they don't do anything, this is how I fully expect them to, in their way, solve it. You know, that's not necessarily solving. It's their attempt to solve it because it's not really an answer. But then again, maybe it is. I would be shocked if it is. Because Carver Willis just has a long way to go. That would be the only way. It's like if you rotate him, I think the 49ers would do it. It'd probably be a rotation of Carver Willis and Robert Jones. Because I think now they kind of just said, screw it. We're done with Connor Kobe. He's the backup to Dominic Pooney, and he can just go up and down through injuries. I think they're really invested in Robert Jones and Carver Willis. They're the 2 main players who are receiving the first team reps in camp. And again, neither one is necessarily making a strong claim, especially Jones, right? And maybe Willis over time, like I said, next preseason game, he's got 2 more quality weeks of practice to maybe get there. And then maybe the 49ers just like, you know what? If only he didn't get hurt with that concussion, maybe he'd be our guy. But instead of us just saying, hey, all the pressure's on you, bud. Have fun blocking the Rams and Myles Garrett if they do line him up on your side and try to stun him against you. So rather than doing that, I definitely can see them doing a platooning, rotating in with Robert Jones. And it would be them because I think those are the top 2. That's how they view their top 2 left guards. And I think at that point, I just see who's going to be the hot hand. Like maybe after 3, 4, 5 games, all of a sudden Jones is like, hey, Jones, we've seen enough reps out of him. When he gets down, our offense is clicking better and he's being more technical. He's executing his blocks better in his assignments where Willis is still not there, or vice versa. Because I think in a perfect world, they would love it for B. If it's even, they'll go with Willis. Even if Willis is actually a step or 2 behind Jones, I think they would still go with Willis and just hope that the actual live game reps forces them to rise to the occasion and makes them better. But also at the same time, Kyle Shanahan is not big on starting rookies. I know Deshaun Stribling's a big guy, but he was their first pick. So, of course, the first picks are typically going to be the more favored and biased. Like, hey, we're just going to give him this chance, and he's going to be involved for sure. Same thing with Ricky Pearsall, even though he was hurt his first year, right? But I think this is the way 49er fans have to start buckling up and expecting that if the 49ers do not add someone, if Robert Jones, Carver Willis, and I guess Connor Kobe, but I think he's kind of dead in the water now at that spot, do not show anything in the next couple weeks, few weeks even, they're going to platoon. I wouldn't be shocked by it. I'd probably be more surprised if they didn't implement that versus if they didn't, assuming if no one gets added. But either way, it's definitely red alert time for this position. I guess the bright side would be if there's any position on the offense that you can overcome and I guess just do a patchwork, even if it is mediocre, is offensive guard. And if you're going to have a hole anywhere, it'd be ideally next to, one of the best in the game and Trent Williams. You're one of your best, if not the best player. So obviously one of the most concerning spots entering week 1. But again, if I'm wanting to look on the bright side, if there's one spot on the offense that you're okay with it not being solidified, it's at least one of the guard spots. Because you can kind of get through it. So either way, I think that's how they're going to solve it, through platooning if no one steps up and they don't add anyone in the next month.